The security checkpoint at Station Helios 9 had processed thousands of species over its 300-year operation. Scaled beings, crystalline entities, sentience made of pure energy. Nothing should have surprised Senior Officer Tyvax anymore. Yet when Nira walked through the scanner with two massive creatures flanking her, every alarm in the facility screamed to life. Halt! Tyvax's forearms shot up, his plasma rifle charging with an ominous hum. Identify yourself and the organisms accompanying you. The human woman stopped. Her worn jacket, bearing patches from a dozen frontier colonies. She looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from crossing half the galaxy without rest, but her eyes were steady, calm even. As she glanced at the creatures beside her, they were nightmares given form. Each stood 3 meters tall, their bodies covered in chitinous armor that seemed to absorb light itself. 6 limbs, ending in razor-sharp talons, scraped against the metal floor. Their heads were eyeless, featureless except for mandibles that dripped with viscous fluid. The species database identified them instantly. Kav. Apex predators. From the void reaches. Kill on site classification across 72 systems. Nira Chen, registered freelance xenobiologist, she said, her voice hoarse. And they're not organisms. They're people. Tyvax's translator struggled with the concept. Those are Kav. Confirmed responsible for the Epsilon massacre. 40,000 dead in 6 hours. You're under arrest. For what? Nira interrupted, stepping forward. The Kav moved with her, perfectly synchronized. For being alive? For having friends? Friends? Tyvax's laugh was harsh. Those things don't have friends. They have prey. And in Ferdi. And in friends. Thanks for watching. And in for boarding this work. One of the Cav made a sound, a deep, resonant clicking that vibrated through the station's hull. The other responded in kind. Nira's expression softened. They're asking if you're threatening me, she translated. I told them no. That this is just a misunderstanding. You speak their language? Well, 1-5, 1-5, embraced. Someone has to. Nira pulled out a datapad, tossing it across the gap. Check the timestamp. I was on Epsilon during the massacre. Know what I saw? Not monsters hunting for sport. I saw parents protecting their young from colonial mining operations that were pumping neurotoxins into their breeding grounds. Tyvax caught the datapad, but didn't look at it. The official report was written by the Hegemony Mining Consortium, who wanted to cover up their liability. Nira's voice grew harder, carrying the weight of witnessed truth. I was there. I watched human security forces, my own species, open fire on Cav nurseries. And you know what happened? These two found me in the chaos, bleeding out from shrapnel. They could have killed me. Should have killed me. Instead, they carried me 18 kilometers through a war zone to get me to a medical station. The Kav clicked again. Softer this time. Nira reached up, her hand barely reaching the shoulder of the nearest creature. It lowered its massive head, mandibles closing gently. After Epsilon, I couldn't leave them, she continued. The hegemony labeled them genocidal terrorists. Every station, every colony, every patrol, all given orders to exterminate on sight. But these two, they're scientists, philosophers. They have names. Officer. This is Klavish Thura. Means one who studies the spaces between stars. And this is Ravith Enna. She who remembers the before time. 2. Tyvax's grip on his rifle loosened slightly. The database says, the database is propaganda. Nira's eyes blazed. You want to know what humans are really good at? Officer. We're good at surviving. We're good at adapting. And we're good at recognizing when we've made a terrible mistake. Epsilon was that mistake. The Cav weren't attacking settlements. They were defending their home. But the hegemony couldn't admit that, So they rewrote history. Even if that's true, Tyvax said carefully. I have protocols. The Council of Species has classified them as. The Council classified them without ever speaking to a single cav. Nira took another step forward. Behind her, security reinforcements were arriving. Weapons trained on the group. You know what the real story of humanity is? It's not that we're the toughest or the smartest. It's that we're stubborn enough to see people where others see monsters. Klav Ish Thura made a trilling sound. Rav Ith Enna responded, their language a symphony of clicks and harmonics. Nira smiled. Genuinely. Smiled at something they said. They say they don't blame your species for not understanding. Nira translated. They say fear makes all beings act irrationally. They say they've learned this from me. From watching humans overcome their own fear. What do you want? Tyvax asked, his officer's training warring with something deeper. More uncertain. Safe passage to the neutral advocacy on Station Meridian 3. There are others there. Species who've been mislabeled as threats. I have evidence, real evidence, of what happened on Epsilon and a dozen other colonies. Hegemony contractors systematically provoking indigenous species to justify resource extraction. Nira's voice cracked slightly. I have proof that the Kav aren't monsters, that they're victims. The station's command channel crackled in Tyvax's ear. Lethal force authorized. Execute the Kav immediately. His finger hovered over the trigger. 3 centuries of service. Every regulation screamed at him to obey, but he looked at Nira, at this exhausted, stubborn human standing between certain death and 2 creatures that should have been her enemies. He thought about the stories. Humanity's legends always came back to the same theme. Standing against impossible odds, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. Tyvax lowered his rifle. Security to command, he said slowly. False alarm. Scanner malfunction. The human is traveling with registered service animals. Canine variants. Clearing her for passage. Nira's eyes widened. Go, Tyvax interrupted. Before I remember my protocols. Before someone higher up the chain checks the sensor logs. You have maybe 10 minutes. Klavesh Thura clicked softly. Tyvax didn't need a translation. It was gratitude. Universal and unmistakable. As Nira and the Kav hurried toward the departure gates, Tyvax watched them go. He was risking his career. Possibly his freedom. But as he watched the massive creatures position themselves protectively around the human, their movements gentle despite their terrifying appearance, he understood. They weren't following her. They were protecting her. And maybe, just maybe, she was protecting them right back. That, Tyvax thought, was the most human thing he'd ever witnessed.